Hello, and welcome to the live Total Retail webinar, Customer Loyalty, the Holy Grail in a Digital World. Today's webinar is being sponsored by Optimove, the leading customer marketing cloud helping over 250 brands drive their entire customer marketing operation. Optimove combines the science of data and the art of marketing to deliver personalized, real-time, multi-channel customer communications at scale. I'm Joe Keenan, Executive Editor of Total Retail and the host of today's event. Before we get started, let me take a second to point out the Tips for Attendees widget on your console. It's the blue one with the wrench on it. If you missed the Tech Tips video we played leading up to the webinar, you can always click this widget for more information. Here today to discuss how brands can develop long-term relationships with their customers and maximize lifetime value, we have Penny Yakul, the founder and CEO of Optimove, as well as Jen Gully, Director of E-commerce Sales at West Point Home, a leading retailer and supplier of high-quality bed and bath products for over 200 years. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Penny to get us started.
Thanks a lot. Happy to be here. Good afternoon, Jen.
Good afternoon.
So guys, just a little overview and brief bio about myself. So my name is Penny Yakul. I'm one of the founders and CEO of a company called Optimove. It's a company that I personally set up back in 2009 in Tel Aviv, Israel. Today I live in New York City, and we are a company that's always trying to understand what drives customer behavior and how we can create a win-win situation between brands and their customers so that customers will fall in love with their brands and choose them again and again over the competition. Today we're broadcasting from our Chelsea office in New York City. It's a little bit rainy today, but other than that, not too cold. And I'm really happy and excited to be here. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Penny. It's Jen Gully, and I have about 20 years experience in e-commerce marketing. I've worked at 1-800-Flowers, Sirius XM Radio, did a little stint at Taylor, and right now I'm at West Point Home. And really my focus is on making the best possible experience on the websites and kind of really driving that home and retaining the customer to get them to come back and, you know, be a great repeat customer. So I think we should just jump into the material right now.
Great. Sounds great. Thanks a lot, Jen. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be kind of like playing it together and talking about different ideas and notions, but a really good way to get started is give this notion of customer loyalty a moment. And there's a reason we show a picture of a trophy, and this is the Holy Grail in the digital world. I think that, you know, there's something that's happening in the economy in general, you know, besides talking to loyalty marketers or customer marketers. I think that in today's economy, it's always been important to foster customer loyalty, but I think that today we see that customers have so much choice. And I think in 20, 30 years ago, you know, a lot of us, we've been captivated by a vendor. It still happens from time to time, probably with the, you know, with the Verizons and Time Warner, right, where you're in a specific zone and you have to use their cable and you don't have a choice. So they have kind of like, let's call it forced loyalty, but in most cases that's not the case, and customers have tremendous power to choose the vendor or the brand that delights them the most and caters for their needs. And I think as time goes by, it's no longer something that we can, it's not a nice to have. This is a necessity, and this is something that businesses that are able to excel at customer loyalty have kind of like a tremendous win to gain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right now, being at West Point, kind of the direct-to-consumer business is very new for us. So we're trying to become this kind of old manufacturing company and turn ourselves into this very like agile company to, you know, we want to be the choice that customers come to, not the big box stores. So this is a real challenge to us, and customer loyalty is the utmost important to us. So I think, you know, we want to give you guys the best tactics and kind of info to retain your customers and be successful.
Great. And yeah, so a little bit a short kind of like setting of expectation. This is kind of like my slide specifically. So I'm testifying something about myself. So I like to think of myself as a person who's always seeking for the truth. And I'm just saying that to talk about the fact that today I will try to help you understand why things work as they work based on my 10-year experience in loyalty marketing and data science. And I'm not going to necessarily provide you with quick hacks or quick tips for kind of like what is the best campaign to run right after the holidays or stuff like that. That's not going to be the type of content that will be provided. It's more going to be the physics, the sheer physics of things, because this is what I think I can provide, and Jen together with me. So let's get on to the content itself. I think that when we talk about loyalty, our tool, the one thing that we're using to foster loyalty is essentially something I like to call customer marketing. Some people call it retention marketing. Some people call it a CRM. Right? It depends however you want to define it. This is the field of marketing that is, doesn't have anything to do with media buying or with ads or with kind of like attracting fresh blood into our site or our store. This is about the people that we already have registered. We already seen them visit our site. This is about people that are already in our databases, and our job is to try to leverage that asset into essentially as a growth engine. So the connection is that the aim of customer marketing is essentially to foster loyalty. You use customer marketing to get loyalty. When you get loyalty, you're able to increase customer lifetime value, LTV, which is obviously something that can change any business dramatically. If you're able to tilt that number and push it up, this becomes something monumental for the business. So this is just a connection, customer marketing and loyalty. Cool. So moving over to the next slide, and this is something that makes my thinking a lot simpler and easier, and this is something that I've developed throughout the years. But when you think about how to achieve the ultimate in customer marketing, right? So we don't want to do just any customer marketing, right? We want to be the best that we can be. It's a specific art and craft that we want to master. And the one thing that makes me understand this is when I think of the notion of starting a conversation. If you think about all the campaigns that you've ever ran, every initiative that you do in your marketing, in your customer marketing department, it all has to do with starting a conversation with your customers, of course. So a birthday campaign is a reason to start a conversation. Essentially, we are always looking for reasons to start a conversation with our customers and not being pesky, not being pokey, kind of like do it in an elegant fashion. And this is the second point. Not only that we want to start a conversation, we want to start an emotionally intelligent one. That means that I'm not just telling you what I want to say. I'm telling you something, you being the customer, I want to say something to a customer at the right time when that message could resonate with that customer. It makes sense for that customer to get that message at that point. And we call this emotional intelligence, just like, with people with high emotional intelligence. These are people that are able to adapt and change the way they talk with different personas or types of people, right? So I know that my wife's very angry in the morning, so I get away from her, right? And this is me displaying emotional intelligence. And people that do it really well, there's tons of studies and research on people that do it really well. It shows that they're very successful in life, at their careers. It's a really super trait. It's not only the IQ, right? It's also the EQ, which is emotionally intelligent. So we feel that brands, when they talk to their customers, they have to attain that trait. They have to be able to speak in a smart fashion, an emotionally intelligent fashion. That's the second point. And the third point is obviously you don't want to start a conversation with your customers once in 2 months, right? It makes no sense. You need to start a conversation when it's relevant and when it makes sense. So, and to sum it up, we call it, you need to do so at the speed of your customers. So are you able to move at the speed of your customers? And a lot of the points we're going to make here is that most businesses are not able to move at the speed of their customers, and they're always lagging, they're always behind. They're sending one message, once a month or 2 months. It's not super insightful, right? Like everybody in the audience, I think if you would think which brands really excite you, like which brands that you are the customer, which brands really make you feel that they're smart, that they get you, that they, look into who you are and change their marketing as you change as a customer. So I think this notion of finding a reason to start a conversation, doing it smart enough and fast enough, this is for me the ultimate in customer marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think these bullet points are great. And one thing I'd like to say about starting a conversation, for me, it's literally starting a conversation. Yes, we can do everything in digital, but with like our company, we've had customers that have had our products for at least 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, which is crazy in today's world. But since we are kind of a startup within a major company, it's just my boss and I, so I handle all the customer service. Well, I can spend a good 15, 20 minutes literally on the phone talking to these people who love our products. So it's literally starting a conversation with them and having that emotional connection. They want to talk to someone. They don't just want to talk to robot customer service, but, they want to feel that their voice is heard. And then I can, I'm kind of almost looping them into our system, because then after that real conversation, hey, do you want to sign up for our email program? Would you like to get some mobile alerts? I can get them hooked in to kind of the whole cycle of communication with them. But I think, literally talking on the phone is something we forget about in the digital age, but I think it's one of those facets we need to focus on too, plus all the email, digital kind of stuff that's out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the personal touch is still something that, we should be using. However, it's obvious that Jen probably cannot call all her customers right and do it every day. So it's kind of like a hint towards the data science part. So she should use this, but she should selectively choose the right customer to talk to. And this is, of course, another communication channel, which is great. So moving on to the next slide, and this is, again, the way I see the mechanics of things. So we want to be the ultimate customer marketers, right? So what does it take, and where are we lagging? So what does it take to reach the ultimate in customer marketing? So I think that if we would envision ourselves as kind of like, I used to do some MMA when I was in my early 30s. Now I'm in my late 30s. But when I did that, I kind of like connected very well with the world of martial artists. And I think that if we are all, as loyalty marketers, martial artists, we want to develop 2 higher traits, I would say. And these 2 higher traits are essentially precision and speed. It sounds naive and cliche, but I'll show you exactly how this relates also to customer marketing. But essentially, this is what we want. We want to be precise. So when we talk to our customers, we have emotional intelligence. We talk to them about the right thing at the right time, the right moment. We're very knowledgeable. We know who they are. We understand who they are. We have a lot of insight in terms of who they are as people. And the speed has to do with moving at their speed. It has to do with having lots and lots of ideas. It has to do with fostering a creative process within our marketing departments. And many things that if we are able to push the envelope on these 2 higher traits, we would then have the ultimate in customer marketing. So this is so I think when you guys are always talking about initiatives and things that you're doing at your marketing department, you should always look at everything you do, every new initiative, with these goggles of saying, okay, is it helping me with precision? Is it helping me with speed? Do I need to improve here, or do I need to improve there? I think for me, it makes it a lot easier, again, to think about how things work and why they work the way they work. And kind of like if we are martial artists, then we need to master different techniques, right? So and one technique is going to be good for speed, and the other technique is going to be good for precision, and maybe one technique is going to be good for both of them. And the way we want to lay out today's presentation is by covering all these different techniques. So I'm just going to read them out loud. So the first one is kind of like an org structure built for speed. So it starts with the way your marketing org is actually built. This also helps you or prevents you from being successful. Marketing technologies is another one. Single customer view is another one. Segmentation is another one. Scientific uplift measurement is another one. Multi-channel communications and catering for the customer journey. So these are all of the techniques we want to cover, and I'm just going to start with the first one, which is the org built for speed. So what do I mean by that? Org built for speed. So if you think about the way customer marketing has been kind of like invented, let's say 15 years ago, so only the enterprise could do it, right? Only very big companies could do it, and they had very expensive systems. So typically you would have maybe a big clunky campaign management system like a Unica or a Primo or something. I'm talking about like older systems, and you would have a data warehouse, and then you would have a Marcom team, and then you would have a messaging tool, like an email tool and different tools. And around those tools, you'd have several different departments. You would have, the campaign managers or the data guys, right? And you would have the marketers, and you would have the analysts or the data scientists. So the way it used to work is that if you want to run a campaign, the marketing would come up with a brief of the segment that they want to run. They would send that brief to the data guys. The data guys would need to write a query to, go through the databases, find the right audience. They'll get a query. There's a little back and forth there. Maybe they have priorities. Maybe one data scientist is sick, so he's not in today. Maybe he's on vacation. He's not in until next week. And then it goes to the Marcom team. The Marcom team has another brief that has to do with design creative. So everything comes together, and the very and a big question, arises. So, I mean, what's the time from ideation to execution? So from the moment somebody has a good idea for a campaign, how much time does it take us to do it? Now, if it takes us 2 weeks or a month or 2 months, then the system will be trained to come up with less ideas, and even when they do come up with ideas, they'll use ones that move the needle. They got to do things that are big, because it takes so much time and so much energy and so much effort. If you have a good idea, but it covers only 2,000 customers, nobody's going to care about it. People's going to say, move on. I mean, it's too much work. We're not going to do it. So we feel that, this old-fashioned approach, which was, mainly because of constraints of technologies and the way things happen, but essentially what you had here, you had kind of like an assembly line, right? So just like kind of like a Henry Ford production line, the first mass manufacturing assembly line that we all know, or even the Chipotle line where we all get our Mexican food. So, one person puts on the beans, the other person puts on the guacamole, and it works pretty well for Chipotle because each task is very simple and it's pretty quick. But here, if the data guy is sick, the entire campaign needs to wait for a week. So it makes us the time from ideation to execution is not fast enough, and it creates it makes us behave in a certain way. So Jen, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Yes, I definitely do. I've kind of seen both worlds out there. I've been at 1-800-Flowers, where we kind of have every single team we need to get every campaign executed, and here at West Point, we are an older company, but internally we're challenging every department to kind of change their cultural thinking and being like, okay, this is the new customer. How do we adapt the department so that we're moving at a faster pace? And a lot of us are getting trained kind of in the techniques of like Hoshin and trying to become more efficient out there. So we're really saying, okay, here's the new customer. We're going to help you kind of come out of that typical manufacturing, that long data cycle, to be a lot faster, because you have to move fast. I mean, look at current events around you. If you're not on top of them, you're going to miss something good to talk about. So you have to like slowly get your team to adapt, and it's not an overnight thing. Definitely, it takes a little bit of time, but you definitely have to like slowly kind of get everybody on the same page as you and working towards that that speed and the accuracy. Otherwise, the campaign's just not going to be successful. So that's just kind of my experience with it. So it's kind of interesting just being the smaller company right now and doing this because we're doing it from, the ground up. So we get to kind of put our say on it and not just the factory of like, okay, go to the data, go to the marketing, go to graphics. We're doing it all and making it the way we want to. So.
Cool. I think that, so to sum this up, I think that the way your marketing org is built is definitely going to determine how you do customer marketing. And if you want to build your org for speed, the solution is that you can't have too many pieces in the assembly line, right? So of course, designers will be, you're going to have the people who build the content, the designers and the graphic designers and people who do copy, and then you're going to have the CRM, I call them the CRM A team. So the CRM A team, they're using technology and they're able to both come up with a brief, do the segment on their own, come up with the designing the test, and also doing the analysis when the campaign is done. You doing the data scientists, they do everything, but so it's a two-department layout. So it's the CRMA team together with the designers that do the copy of the content itself, and that's it. Instead of like a 4 or 5 department layout that they had before, which is a lot slower. So if you think about startups, and just like Jen was saying, so she's now working in a startup within a big company. So when you have to coordinate with yourself, it's very easy. It's very easy. There's no miscommunication, at least for most people.
I'm always ready.
Yeah. So for most people that works, and I think that's part of. So I think the good news for CRM talent and for CRM practitioners is that you guys are going to be front stage. It means you need to know more, but there's so much great tools and technologies and capabilities today that it's not such a big deal. And with just a few more steps, you guys can shorten the cycle and have a very quick layout. So remember, time from ideation to execution, I want it to be very short. I want it to be, minutes or hours or for complicated stuff, I want it to be days, but not more than that, because this creates a department who's kind of like, fostering creativity. Every day somebody else comes to the office, what, let's do this and that. I have another idea. No, and somebody says, okay, let's test it. It's not a big deal. It will take us hours or days, but we can test it. When you have that, you have a lot of people coming up with ideas. And then you cater for your customer. Then you're able to start a conversation with your customer. You have more reasons to start a conversation, smarter reasons to start a conversation, because you have a creative department. So this is the first technique which helps you with speed. So this one helps you with speed. Let's go to the next one. So the next technique also helps you with speed, and this is about marketing technologies. So again, if we go back, as I said before, 15, 20 years ago, we would have this on-premise technologies. It was very, very expensive. Only very big companies were able to afford it. It was pretty clunky. We didn't have the revolution of user experience and proper tools that we have today. So marketing technologies, first and foremost, they give us the magic of cloud computing, API connectivity, automation, and data science. We're getting all of these wonderful things for so many tools, and I can tell you as somebody who owns a company, that produces software, you guys are getting it pretty cheap. I mean, the software world is highly competitive and highly fast, and this pushes prices down. So as years go by, you're always getting better and better technologies for a lower and lower price, and as long as you just leverage it and utilize it, you'll get amazing ROIs on these tools. So you can accomplish so much more. Another thing that happens with a good marketing technology is that essentially it wraps and productizes an entire topic. So if you're talking about customer marketing, I want to start doing customer marketing in my company, and I haven't done it before, I know I'll buy this system, and that system is going to be my gateway to this field, right? I'm going to have all of my data there. I'm going to have all of my campaigns and communications with customers. I'm going to have my results, my stats, my metrics. I can show it to my managers. This becomes kind of like it wraps everything in the box, and it makes it very easy to manage. And the last but not least, when you get a good technology that comes with good methodology, it enforces work methodology. So in many cases, maybe you have a few people working in the company and some of them are new and they're not up to speed with how you should do certain things. But if you have a good tool, that tool would enforce methodology. That tool would align everybody to work in a specific way that has been proven to be the best way in that specific field. Cool. So this is the second technique we want to master, which is marketing technology. All right. The first one was org built for speed. Let's go for the next one. And the next one is a technique that has to do with precision, not with speed, with precision. So when we talk about precision, we start talking about knowing the customer, right? And for us to be precise when executing customer marketing, the key here is intelligence, right? We want to collect intelligence, collect data, understand more and more and more about our customer. Obviously, there's tons of ways to know our customers. We can, invite them over for a panel and ask them some questions, but that's going to be a small sample. Today, we have our customers are telling us who they are in the data. They're showing us who they are. We know what they bought. We know that they visited our website. We know which pages they looked at. We know if they opened our emails. We know if if we put on some surveys and they fill it up. So, and sometimes we can get additional data about what they do in the web, and in social media and things like that. So we have a lot of information on our customer, and the very first thing you need to do, and this is in the third bullet. This is I think it's a basic necessity in order to practice customer marketing, and it's this notion of a single customer view. So I think I like to cook a lot, and I think just like when you cook, if you have a proper pantry, right, that's nicely stacked up, you can start cooking. So this is the single customer view. It's kind of like your pantry as a customer marketer. You need this to get started. This is the foundation of everything, right? This is the cornerstone. So the problem is that why is it so difficult to get to a single customer view? Because customer data is dispersed across multiple systems or databases, right? So in my billing system, I have customer payments. In my CRM system, I have customer, support requests and tickets and stuff like that. In another system, I have in my website vendor, I have like all their browsing behavior. So there's various systems. Each one of them captures a small silo of data, but essentially it's the same person. So when the person, is there, they expect us to know everything. So a single customer view, you see down there, it's essentially a flat file. So you get the customer ID and you get multiple columns coming in from different systems, and each column represents, a piece of data, something about the customer. So like how much they're spending, their gender, their state, the level of affluency, many things that we can know about our customers, we're going to represent just like a very wide Excel spreadsheet, because that's the easiest to understand. I can just read one line and I have everything I want about my customers. So this is the single customer view, and kind of like bringing into a flat structure. Some of you probably have it in your company, some of you don't. Some of you have it partially, which is also okay. But basically, I think that this is a very strong foundation. I would say this is where I would get started to know my customers. Okay, great. So after we have our single customer view, we can start cooking. Right now we have a full pantry. Now let's start cooking, and probably the first dish we're gonna cook. Actually, I have here also pasta sauces, but it has nothing to do with us cooking. I'll get to it in a second. But probably the first dish and the most important meal for us as customer marketers is something called segmentation, right? So segmentation is probably something that you guys have been hearing about for years. You probably have different notions in terms of what it means. Maybe it's just segmenting customers by gender or by state, right? Is this a segmentation? So the answer is yes. But segmentation is a very powerful and a very broad notion that we need to understand. So this will be a big chunk of our presentation. Is going to be about segmentation. And the reason you have all of these Prego pasta sauces is I think this is the best way to explain the miracles and benefits of segmentation. So here's a little bit of a story, and you can find it in a TED Talk by Malcolm Gladwell. So basically, I think in the late 70s, supermarkets were a lot different than today. Today, when you go into a supermarket, you look at pasta sauces. There's like, you can lose yourself and not know what to buy from all the variety and different types of sauces. Same goes for cereal and different types of food, right? So why is that? Why are we living in a world that we go into the supermarket and there's so many different types of pasta sauces, right? Even if it's from the same brand, just like you're seeing on the screen. So there's an important piece of history. So back in the late 70s, these companies like Prego, before they launch a new product, they do a lot of testing, right? They get focus groups and people they do samples and people taste it. And they say what they like most and what they like less. And the people at the time, everybody was looking for the perfect dish, the perfect formula. Give us the perfect pasta sauce that everybody on the planet is going to fall in love with. And the problem is that there's no such thing. There's no perfect dish for for all of humanity, right? There is a lot of clusters or a lot of different segments of people with different palates and different tastes and different taste buds and different, probably, God knows, childhood references and different reasons why we like different types of sauces. So the first person to do this, his name is Howard Moskowitz. He's a Harvard PhD researcher, and what he was doing, he was conducting this analysis for Campbell soups, basically for the brand Prego. And what he did was instead of testing, one recipe or 4 different recipes, he was using different variations. He was using, the level of spiciness and how much garlic is in it, and the consistency of the sauce. If it's more liquidy or more chunky with tomatoes. So he was trying, and he came up with 45 different recipes, and he was bringing in a lot of people to taste it. And after he got the results, obviously everybody ranked everything that they liked. He has this technique where he can find clusters, and he found at the time it was 3 main clusters of what people liked, and back the late 70s, Prego launched 3, instead of launching 1 jar of pasta sauce, they launched 3, and at the time they were not doing so well, and they took over the market. They immediately became number 1, and the rest is history. And I think this, for me at least, when I was studying this notion of segmentation, again, trying to explain to myself, I think this story really resonated with me because it's about food, and I think it makes so much sense why this works, because we are different as people. So we need to find these personas and then talk to them differently, cater to them differently, provide them with a different offering.
Yeah, I think also with like segmentation and data and stuff, I think it can become easily overwhelming, and you can get just crazy because you have data coming in from all directions these days. And so I think, I know we have all kinds of different, people on the phone right now from small to large companies, but I think you have to start small with your segmentation, the groups, like start testing. You don't have to figure out every single little one out today, but start with some of the bigger ones because they're going to drive the most revenue. And then slowly you can kind of break down each of those groups, but just kind of start with some high-level goals of what you want to do, because I know personally, like, the data to me becomes overwhelming, and you may get flustered of where should I start with this group or that group, but make some just high-level goals. Like, I think this group's going to buy our blankets in my case, or they're going to buy the blue blanket, or the expensive blue blanket. So kind of just like start smaller with your groups and stuff, because 45 different groups becomes overwhelming with tomato sauce especially, but you'll narrow it down to your key groups eventually.
Absolutely, I concur, and I think it's absolutely right. By the way, he did eventually create 3, because also probably for the company it wasn't that easy. But I think I think Jen is 100% correct, and basically I call it I think today we talked about having so much data, but to some degree, I think we even have data obesity in some ways, and our job is to curate, right? Is to actually get focused, find something, and I agree 100% with Jen's philosophy. And by the way, we have a few here examples of simple segmentations that can get you started. This is one of the things. So great. So we understand the pasta sauces and why segmentation is important. And now let's move to some techniques and how it works. So basically, in the world of segmentation, I know this looks a bit mathematical, but just to explain one important notion, we have two types of segmentation, and it's important for us to understand that segmentation is something that we do for the purpose of organizing and summarizing our data. This is the purpose. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's about organizing and summarizing our data, and especially if we're not trying to build it for a specific, like, I'm not going to tell you, but in the world of machine learning, you have supervised learning and unsupervised, but typically segmentation is unsupervised. So a lot of people, what they do rule-based segmentation. So if I have, this is a two-dimensional chart, let's say I have a monetary value on the y-axis and frequency on the x-axis, and I have all these dots as different customers. So I could divide my database into 4 different clusters, right? People with at the bottom left, it could be people with low monetary value and low frequency value. And at the top right, it's going to be, it's probably not going to look exactly like this, but usually we'll say people that bought more above or below $1,000 and above or below 4 visits, right, or four purchases. This is the rule-based segmentation, which is pretty common. It's the one that most companies use, and it's a very good start. It's a very good start, and I would do some analysis in terms of where to put those, those specific borders in the data. But the next type of segmentation, it's called cluster analysis, and this type we're actually letting the data tell us how the segments look like. So it's kind of like looking for, in this case, it's 2-dimensional clouds of the data. So where does the data centralize? How does the data reside? And in this case, I see, again, 4 clusters, but I see it's laid out completely differently. So customers who belong to the red cluster, in the rule-based scenario, they'll be divided into 2 different segments. So these are kind of like the 2, I would say, meta techniques that are being used for segmentation. And let's see a few examples. So Jen was talking about starting easy. So probably the best retail segmentation, that the first one you should do if you don't have anything else, is something called RFM. So RFM is recency, frequency, monetary. So if I look at these 3 attributes for a customer, there's a good chance I'm going to know who are my best customers, who are my second best customers, and things like that. So monetary is how much money are my customers spending. I can do it ever since I met them. I can use monetary value for the last year. Depends on what you want to achieve. Frequency is how many times they visited ever since I met them, or in the last year or the last 6 months, depending how you want to treat your rolling horizon. And recency could be days since last purchase, or weeks since last purchase, or months since last purchase. It doesn't matter. And the simple way to do it is we can divide each one of these attributes into in this case, it's into quartiles or deciles, so it doesn't matter, but it means that we're gonna use rule-based segmentation on each one of these attributes and cut it even, in this case, at the 75th percentile, 50th percentile, 25th percentile. So we have 4 quartiles of segments. Same goes for frequency, and same goes for monetary. And then I can say, people that, and in frequency, I'm looking for a low number, right? A smaller number is better. Sorry, in recency. In recency, a smaller number is better. And obviously in frequency and monetary, a bigger number is better. But if somebody is in the best tier of R, the best tier of F, and the best tier of M, these are probably very good customers. So not only that they spend a lot of money and that they do so with lots and lots of visits. We probably, by the way, Jen, it's always an interesting question. What would you prefer? So would you prefer a client that bought like 1 order for $1,500 or 3 orders of $500?
Pre-orders of 500 because I can market to them again with different things to keep coming back and spending over and over.
So it's a probably good indication that somebody chose us 3 times. Right. So it's probably more likely that, so if you try to predict, let's say, the future value, they probably have better future value. So this is what. So yeah, it's an interesting question. So because obviously, by the way, monetary and frequency are very much correlated, right? So in many cases, you see when this is high, that is high. So it's interesting to look at those groups of low monetary value and high frequency, or very high monetary value and low frequency, right? These could tell us about opportunities. But essentially, this is a very important segmentation. And yes, just like Jen was saying, RFM, I can tell you, it's a very strong predictor for future value. So probably the customers that spend a lot and visited a lot, if you wait a year or 2 years, these are the customers that will continue to spend a lot and continue to visit a lot. Obviously not everyone, but as a cohort, as a big group, they will outshine other groups in the RFM which are not as strong. So this is definitely our RFM analysis. Another kind of like RFM analysis that's done using cluster analysis, so hopefully you guys can see. So in cluster analysis, by the way, this is a segmentation done on monetary and frequency, so you can see net paid amount and number of paid orders. So I have 2 attributes, but you see that I have 3 clusters with exactly 1 order and 2 clusters of 2 orders, and the clusters of 1 order have different spend. And you can see I have this cluster here with $100 of spend in 1 order, and at the top I have 2 orders in 118. So the cluster analysis actually organizes the data in a way that I didn't know existed. I would not know to do this division myself. I would not know how to draw the line like this, but this tells me, and you can see also the number of customers. So the second cluster, there's only 79 customers who present this behavior of buying 2 times, but for a lot lower amount. So cluster analysis doesn't care what you have pre-decided, right? Cluster analysis segments as the data is laid out. So in many cases, it's going to give us a lot more insights. Okay, moving on. So lifecycle stage segmentation. So after we do RFM is pretty cool. There's another segmentation that's very important and very much top level. It's the lifecycle segmentation. And with the lifecycle segmentation, we have typically we have new customers, active customers, and customers who churned. The reason it's super important is because we understand as marketers is that for new customers, you want to incubate them, right? They're just coming in, they're judging us for the first time, and we want to understand who they are as customers in the best possible way. Customers who churned, obviously you want to win them back. So it's kind of like understanding there's different marketing philosophies to apply for each one of them. So how do you do this segmentation? So let's start with new customers. So new customers, typically, it's time since the first purchase, right? Or time since registration, depending how you want to define you. So for example, I can tell you that 3 months is a very good rule of thumb in e-commerce to define as the period for new customers. So in the first 3 months from the first purchase, right? How do we choose this thing? We try to see how likely are they to make a second purchase. So if we want to give them enough time to make a second purchase, but on the other hand, we still want it to be short so they would be considered as new. We're not going to give them 2 years and keep them new customers for 2 years. It makes no sense, right? So when we analyze the probability of that cohort of people buying more than once, buying again, we see that in the first 3 months, we see most of the behavior, and then after 3 months, in the 4th month, it starts to stabilize, so we are getting the best benefit in the first 3 months. So I would definitely urge you guys, I'm starting to speed up a little bit because I see we don't have a ton of time. I would definitely urge you guys to kind of like divide your database into lifecycle stages and look at that new customer lifecycle stage. Adapt your strategy for new customers, right? Talk to your new customers after the first purchase. You know, talk to very strong new customers versus the regular new customers, right? So it's a very important kind of like stage to look at. Another important stage is churn. So churn is mainly based on recency. So I don't know, in most businesses, the customer is not calling me and saying, hey, I'm never coming back, right? Unless it's the bank or a telco company. Mostly with retailers, they don't do, it's a silent churn, right? We don't know that they churn. So we're looking at recency. If I have a store and Jen didn't buy for 6 months, depending on the frequency of that store, but let's say I'm selling groceries, if Jen didn't buy for 6 months, even probably 2 months, that's a very bad sign. So there's a very good chance she's not coming back. So we can send people to churn based on recency. So if they didn't buy for 9 months, 6 months, a year, depending on the business, I'm going to send them over to churn. And we can also do something we call a churn factor, where we're going to do it, on a personal basis per customer. So, for example, if Jen's buying every 2 weeks, she hasn't bought for 2 months, her churn factor is 4. So I'm used to seeing her every 2 weeks, but she hasn't bought for 2 months. So it's 4 times her average frequency. So, but for another customer who's buying once a month, for him, churn factor of 4, it's 4 months, right? If he buys once a month. So churn factor is a nice way to kind of like create a churn criteria which is personal per customer. Okay. And next life cycle stage is reactivated. So reactivated, it's a pretty important stage. A lot of people don't use it because if you only do new, active, and churn, once people come back from churn to active, it's a problem because a lot of them churn again. So what we have found is that if you put kind of like a middle ground, another stage where you can call it back from churn or reactivated, you let them sit there for another 3 months, right? So the same period that you had for new, right? So if you had for new 3 months, so after coming back, let them sit there for 3 months. Let's see what happens. Let's see if they zigzag and go back to churn, which will happen in many cases, or let's see if they kind of like stick around and become active. A few things we know about reactivated. We know that these customers behave just like new customers, so we need to re-incubate them all over again. You can see in their future value, these groups are pretty close. It's roughly the same thing. And we also know that if a customer reactivated on his own, he has a better future value, so he's not like a cherry picker that's looking for an offer. And we also know that if a customer churned only once before, there's a good chance, so we need to work harder, because if they churned a lot of times before, they do know how to zigzag. So they'll come back, they'll go to churn again, then they'll come back again. So we need to see how many times did they churn before. Moving on. So this whole process can be combined, and this is what we do at OptiMove. We combine this notion of stages, segmentation layers, and micro-segments into this very kind of like a whole customer marketing approach that goes all the way down to micro-segments. But you guys can definitely stick with the stages and RFM and things like that. And lastly, VIPs, this is a very strong segment to cater for, because we all know the Pareto principle, right? So we all know that, probably 80% of the clothes I'm wearing, 80% of the time I'm using 20% of my closet, right? And the rest of the 80% is the waste. And in the radio station, 20% of the songs are being played 80% of the time, right? So the same goes with your customer, right? There's a small segment of your customers, and with some retailers it's a lot stronger than 20/80, that actually generates really high value. And these people, you should treat them like kings, because eventually if you just lose 2 or 3 or 20 of them, depends on the business, it could mean a lot of impact to the company. So definitely create a separate segment for VIPs. These are customers in a class of their own, and there's many ways to find them, right? You can do something simple like the top X%, like top 5% of my customers. So just sort your customers by spend and take the top 5% or top 2%. Or say I have a budget that I can treat 1,000 VIPs, no more. So just take the top 1,000, right? And we have other scientific ways to kind of like find them, and there's more precise ways to find them. So you can use either the data science ways or the simple ways. And the ROI of segmentation, again, it comes just like in the pasta sauce example. If you're running campaigns on all of your customers, maybe you're going to get an uplift of $28 on average. But if you're dividing it to many, many segments, in each one of these small segments, you're going to have a different message. You're going to get a different uplift. And on average, you're gonna hit a higher number. That's the idea. The idea is exactly the same as in the pasta example. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to talk about two more things. One of them is scientific uplift measurement. So essentially, when we run a campaign, what we want to do, we want to use this thing called a control group. So if I'm running a campaign for 1,000 people, I want to isolate 100, set them aside as a control group, and if this campaign is running for 7 days, I want to wait for 7 days, see the actual response rate of the control group versus the test group, and I want to see that I'm able to beat it. So if I'm doing 20% versus 14, and my average order value in the test group is 200 versus 150, then I know that I made money. A lot of people are not measuring their campaigns in the proper way. You may be looking at open rates or click rate or looking at revenue attribution, but you're not attributing what would have happened without you running the campaign. If you're targeting your VIPs, they're coming to your store any week regardless of any campaign, right? So you always have to gauge the uplift just like they do in clinical trials, right? They're always going to give you, if they invent a new drug for headaches, they'll give you a tic-tac to see if the placebo effect is actually kicking in and not the drug. Cool. So last technique is catering for the customer journey. So this one helps us both with speed and precision. You know this notion of a journey. It's really good for new customers and reactivated customers, right? So we want to take them through this process of, hey, here's a welcome email after 2 days. If you bought, here's a kind of like a coupon for the next purchase. Or if you didn't open the email, I'm going to send you something else. So we're building this layout. And the one thing I want to say, remember, when do you want to start a conversation? When do you have a good reason to start a conversation? So we call this the static journey. And then the infinite journey, which is the second type, is instead of us blueprinting everything that could happen, we basically build different segments or different states that the customer could be at. Whenever the customer reaches that state, we're going to serve a specific message, and then the customer would change again. Once they change, we serve another message. So we let each customer draw their own journey based on how they change in the data versus us kind of like blueprinting what would happen. The good thing about the blueprint is that you can show it to other people. It's very easy to understand what happens, but sometimes a very important thing with your customer could have happened and you forgot to cater for it. Also becomes very hard to manage these things at scale. So this is the static journey versus the infinite journey. And last but not least is the multi-channel communication, where when we do these campaigns and this starting a conversation with our customer, we want to make sure that we do it at the right channel. We want to make sure that we sometimes reinforce the same message over a few channels, because then our primitive brain is going to tell us, oh, this is something I need to look at, right? I can't ignore it. So it works because it caters to how we are wired. This is how our brain works. And sometimes we can complement between two messages and say, I'll send you a text because I know there's a 100% open rate, and then I'll tell you in the text there's a present waiting for you at your email, and then I'm going to use the rich template that I have with email. So I was kind of like running very fast because I noticed that we didn't have a lot of time left. So now it's a good time for Q&A. Please take it away, John.
Thanks, Penny. So I'm going to jump in here. So we do have a couple minutes for your questions. As noted on your screen, you can do so by submitting your questions using the Q&A box on your console. So my first question, and I'll open this to both you, Penny, and Jen as well. The question is, do you have any thoughts on how you can predict future lifetime value of a customer?
Yeah, so to predict future lifetime value, we talked about kind of like the RFM as being a very good predictor, and that's a good way. Another way to predict, it depends on the means that you have, right? You can go fully blown with data science and build like a very sophisticated model, just like we do in OptiMove, and you can also do it in a more simple manner. You can look at a kind of like a cohort of accumulated revenue, and then kind of like use even Excel to draw the line how it's supposed to continue and get it from there. So there's a few ways to do that depending on how much you want to invest. but I definitely recommend kind of like managing that number on an ongoing basis.
Okay, my next question I have here is the attendee asks about reconnecting with loyal customers again after a period of no contact or inactivity. Thoughts about techniques there, and then yeah, so around kind of reconnecting after a period of inaction from some of your best customers.
Yeah, so
I mean, Penny can talk about more technical and the fun data side of it. I think just from a pure marketing side, I think you have to really look at what they were buying and almost think outside the box. Something that you maybe can send them or offer them that kind of is going to grab their attention. I know at Flowers one time we actually sent people, I think it was like 2 to 3 cookies in a little gift box as kind of just a little surprise in the mail, to try and get them to re-engage with us, because, you know, who doesn't love a little sweet treat in their mail that shows up? But I think you just have to think outside of the box. So like slamming them with another email or another text, I think you just have to be a little bit unique there. And I think that's where the data is so important, to see kind of what were they buying, you know, and how much were they spending to kind of cater to them. That would be my suggestion on that.
Cool.
And then the next question I have here is, do you have some ideas or thoughts around tools that can pull data from multiple CRMs into one system to give you a single customer view?
Yeah, so typically, yeah, it's a question from Brian. So typically, Brian, the way this works is that you need to it's around ETL processes, right? So you need to extract, transform, and load the data. So that process of uniting data from various sources, so then it depends. If it's kind of like Google Analytics and Gmail and Dropbox and stuff like that, then you have some tools and connectors to these things. But typically data sits within more enterprise systems, and then it becomes slightly more murky. You need to use, so we at Optimove, we do it for all of our customers. We build a single customer view for them in our cloud. But what we do is our data scientist just connects to all of these places, builds the pipes, you know, gets all the data, cleanses the data. You need to do some sanity checks. You need to do, you know, you need to kind of like look for anomalies, because the very important thing about data, it has to be super clean. It's garbage in, garbage out. So I don't know any like magic solutions, but definitely there's some agencies or consultancies or even in-house, if you have a dedicated data engineer, probably he can pull it off. There's many tools that it's not that hard, but definitely needs somebody with their fullest attention.
I'll try to get one more in here for you, Penny and Jen. Are you using third-party data, you know, and also social data as you look to? Are you integrating into your first-party customer data to build that single view of the customer? Maybe some thoughts there and an example. Or...
So yeah, so we mainly rely on first-party data. We do append, you know, sometimes you can learn a lot from a person's zip code, so you can know a lot about this. There's a lot of statistics from the IRS or even from the census about, you know, the level of affluency and things like that. I found that in many times, just looking at a person's, you know, website activity, like the types of products they look at, you can know if they're a female or male based on the types of products they look at. You can know if the products are very expensive or would they make a purchase. You can know about the level of affluency. In many cases, it's better than third-party, you know, solutions. Definitely DMPs. If you live in the acquisition world and you want to kind of like look for customers who are, you know, if you're selling cars and you get people that look at a website that compares prices of cars, then definitely they're on the market to buy cars now. So it's a good timing to approach them. But in terms of getting to know the customer, I found that first-party data is the most reliable for me.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time for today. I want to take this opportunity on behalf of Total Retail and Optimove, who is the sponsor of today's webinar, to thank you for attending. Be sure to check out our webinar page to get information on all of our archived and upcoming webinars. If you would take just a minute to fill out the brief feedback survey that will appear on your screen next, we would very much appreciate it. Your feedback will influence the webinars we bring to you in the future. So with that, I want to say thank you, and I hope to see you all at the next Total Retail webinar. Have a good day, everyone.